thanks for coming. I'm Kate Sweeney. This
I'm
is Ali Cook. I think we thought we'd start our talk with a little talk about how we start actually making the work that's in the exhibition, and then it will probably cycle around to discourses and where we see the work fit in and how we make other decisions. So, yeah, we both thought, because Ali has some small drawings in the show, we talk about how we both start in our sketchbooks. I've got my little nest of stuff here, including my sketchbook, and talk about how we begin really with the figure, don't we? And we begin to draw and sketch. I suppose I begin with a sort of domestic, something I sort of notice out of the corner of my eye about myself in a reflection, or maybe just in a state of an emotional state that I can see myself in, and try to sort of capture it in a life drawing mode in the mirror, in quite graphical or figurative sketches. And in the last couple of years, I've had the opportunity through residencies and a bigger studio to think about making the work much bigger. And so I decided to go from these quite small drawings that often manifest in little films, that work, I suppose, as a sort of mapping exercise, and one where I'm trying to control what the information is that's going onto the paper, to drawing on paper in which I'm immersed. So I'm sort of immersed in the map, I guess, and I suppose lost in the work, which is why the drawings are, I guess, larger than life. They're sort of bigger than I am, and they are a kind of exploration of something that I don't always know exactly where I'm starting, so they're quite performative. But they all begin with sort of sketches of the fairly mundane domestic scenes, and then through a process of pouring, and I suppose quite a rough watercolour process of just pouring liquids and splashes and drips onto the paper, I'm able to sort of begin to pick out the figurative frame and the shape that I want, but then also I'm led by the materials, which are quite hard to paint with, or hard to work with. I'm not even sure I'd call them paintings. And they begin to suggest shape and expression, and it's then that I return to them with the charcoals that I make as well, and draw into them. So they don't start, if you like, as drawings, they sort of become drawings, so that they have the occasional line put in that I feel like relates it back to the sketch that I started with.
To add on to that, I think the drawings for me kind of feel like a constant conversation, like we were talking about yesterday. No worries, I sit down, sorry. The drawings, I think, feel kind of like a constant conversation with your imagination, and then the paintings feel like more of an elaboration and kind of a dance with like a certain moment through it. And I think it's interesting, Stephen Mooney, one of the lecturers in Newcastle University, described to me like illustrative versus generative ways of making, and I think the two paintings go well together, because, like you're saying, it feels more generative with the materials almost guiding you into the forms with yours, where I think, and I'm trying to move away from it a little bit, I end up going quite illustrative with the paintings as well. I think I start off with that initial idea and things get shuffled about in the process, but then when it does come to the actual painting, it feels like there's not that much of a gap. It's more like imposing your ideas onto it, which I think is really nice, like with the materials of yours and just the organic nature of the figure kind of coming through it, in comparison to sort of the more forced on figure with those ones. And it feels like kind of imposing an idea onto a canvas, I think, is a lovely blend between both of them, Yeah,
I think what's written in the blurb kind of sums up the connection between our works, I think, which is this idea of the body being a transgressor as well as a carrier of narratives. And I think some of that process speaks to that, I think. So I started this work that's very specific about my life as a mum, as a parent, about 5 or 6 years ago, well, just after or during lockdown, when my son first arrived, he's adopted, and I just had this very visceral sense of becoming, and I just needed to express something about it. It was very joyous and simple, quite earnest desire to create in response to this feeling, and also being kind of aware that maybe there wasn't that much imagery and that much kind of figurative and visual exploration of the idea of the body in motherhood that goes, or the body in parenthood that goes beyond the essential body, but speaks of something quite visceral and isn't just the verb to mother. Is kind of, I wanted something quite speculative and imaginative and kind of, I suppose, a little bit subversive, and just to sort of say, yes, when you are a parent beyond blood, in my case, like in a lesbian relationship, we do make babies and we do it with lots of liquids and lots of organic processes, and some of that work just felt like it has implicit kind of desire to express that, but also grew out of a desire to just try to capture the adopted mother's body. It was like, well, it's just a sort of simple starting point, really. It was lockdown, and this is a slightly anecdotal and therefore not entirely straightforward truth, but because everything was shut and we were doing our daily walks, if you remember all that, me and my son were sort of bonding, I guess, through collecting materials, which is what kids do, they pick up stuff. And so I started to make drawing materials from that material. And again, it just felt like the very practical and very straightforward also offered a poetic that I thought, I'm just going to lean into this. I'm not sure if it's a little bit, not cheesy is the wrong way, but I'm just going to do it, and just found that these materials were like sort of fascinating to me, and like they were hard to work with and they were hard to make in the first place, but they gave really surprising results, and they're not something that I can control very easily, but then I'm sort of getting better at it, but then I'm also not. And so that sort of was the sort of starting point for all that. So that idea of the figure as a transgressive narrative for me feels like it is this sort of queer ecology of connectivity that I don't care if the language of birth suits it or not. It feels like I want art to do something different than other disciplines, I suppose, and so sometimes just sort of being imaginative is one of the places you can do that, I think, and maybe be wistful and desirous and regretful, but also chin out, whatever that kind of thing is.
I think that's why it felt so nice when you saying all the stuff there, working with you through this project with all the pieces coming together, because I think I've just finished uni and stuff, so just with you talking about, it's kind of like anecdotal stuff again. I think off the back of uni, you kind of got your whole future ahead of you, and that felt kind of frightening, so then that kind of birthed those pieces, which summed up a sort of isolation, just everything going on at the moment that happened. But then working on this with you, I think you kind of the exhibition with Paul and JP and everyone, I think had a nice yin and yang of kind of hopefulness and a little bit of hopelessness, but not that that's a permanent thing as well. Even when we were talking about that piece, I think art can serve as a way to kind of exercise feelings that are difficult to put words to, and I think that's kind of what that one was doing, and the black one as well, just with you saying about the kind of organic nature of yours and kind of the earthliness of them. They just feel really just I don't know, safe places for growth and excitement and exploration, with the figure kind of merging through them. And then I think on the flip side, maybe you have kind of something like that, which was just about technology and where we're at the moment with that. And even with the materiality of it, I was using acrylic paint for that one, which I think can almost feel like a bit of a plasticky sort of thing to work with. So I think that kind of leaned into the robotic nature of that piece as well. where it was working with something almost tacky, which I think breeds the like sort of B-reel movie type form of the figure, yeah. But then, like with those two being the sort of bleaker ones, I think that one with the hands there works really nice with both of your larger paintings, and almost like an out the gloom of everything a little bit. It's nice to have that spread, I think, in the room with them all working together, and sort of the organic elements tying in with both of your pieces as well, yeah. I think just like the sort of spread of human experience is something fascinating about the whole show as well, yeah.
Yeah, I think when we first sort of looked at each other's work, I sort of found myself being kind of, so now the work's all together, it makes total sense, but I was a bit flummoxed at first, and I think you can get so engaged with what you think your work's about, and then someone puts something else next to it, and it's like, oh, okay. It doesn't change the meaning or anything of the work, but you just suddenly are able to look at it differently, and I think it felt like that's the point of a show with somebody else, which has been really great.
It's been fantastic, yeah. Sorry.
No.
I was just going to say, even with kind of like the sort of lingering feelings of like, oh, you got the whole world ahead of you, like it feels like crazy times right now, to be part of something like this almost kind of drags you out a little bit of that as well. Like the pieces I've been doing more recently have totally been informed, I'd say, by the kind of earthly qualities of yours and the tones and just the kind of like togetherness of everything. I was like, that's just it kind of shines a light on the way you look at the world a little bit.
Well, after I was looking at yours, I went back and I was looking at my Philip Guston and my paintings.
Yeah.
Looking at them for years and just feeling really like, oh yeah, so nice. But I mean, I've been practicing as an artist, but in lots of different contexts for many, many years, and I carry around an awful lot of is theory the right word, but a lot of kind of implicit, as I was saying before, sort of ideas about what my practice fits into and what it speaks into and what worlds I want to be present in. So I haven't had that many gallery shows in the last few years, because some of this project, I guess, feels like I can talk about some of the things that it's about in very different contexts, and it feels very nice to talk about its materiality and its makerly process, and not always talk about, I guess, some of the sort of implicit politics of it, like, queer family, adoptive bodies, all the different issues that fits with. But I actually quite like those discourses hanging around it. It's just a case of holding them all, which isn't always easy, but in this show it feels like your work just gives that little hook for me, like just keeps it on the figurative, keeps it in the body.
I think that ebb and flow of the figure through all of it is so lovely to see as well, how sometimes it kind of emerges into some of the paintings, but then you can see it dissolving and almost like just that atmosphere. I think that's so lovely, it becomes like less of a solid thing and more of a feeling.
It does, and when the exhibition started being advertised, more than one person asked me whether Ali was a man or a woman, and I thought that was really interesting, because I thought, that's interesting, because I think I carry all of this context, subtext, metatext, whatever, in myself, and I've always felt that I do that way more than I actually do it, I think. And maybe Ali feels similar, like, I think my work queers his work, and in a way his work kind of gives mine space to speak into a different world as well. It's really nice. It's like, that's a transgression as well, and I think that sort of made me think really positively, like sort of a way forward through, let's face it, quite a mire of semantics that we can all find ourselves in when we're talking about our practices or the world or whatever. It's just that idea that, things can be fluid and they can be in different spaces and speak to different things at different times. Because the other day I popped into Newcastle Uni for a talk on eco-crit. I think one of the MA students that presented it's here today. Because I was, I have been interested in thinking about the work as the materials being so handmade and not being kind of generated industrially, or that I made them basically, and that sort of speaks to a sort of eco-criticism and stuff. But it just feels really freeing to be able to hold that quite lightly and not worry too much about whether it does do that, or should I tie that into an ethics, or it just sort of hangs nicely with it, I think. I'm hoping, but maybe, you know.
Definitely. I think like we were talking about a little bit yesterday, and I think like just talking about the kind of like time frame of a painting as well. Like you're saying, you worked on these pieces just for ages. I feel like the feelings and thoughts and everything of life kind of like is that the right word? Kind of seep into what you're doing without you even realising. Yeah, like with those ones, kind of coming the end of uni with like the robotics and everything, it was like that. And then that one, just seeing everything at the moment, the craziness of it. And that one, more of like a hopeful approach on like just the life of an artist. That's why it was called like the art dealer, like someone dealing with art, and just the growth that can happen through creativity, which I feel like seeps into your work as well, which is super nice. Yeah.
Yes, it is funny, isn't it? It's like kids, it's like they do something and you're like, God, that's awful. But you just sort of think, well, I can live with it, and I can change it a little bit, but at some point I'm going to really wreck this if I touch it again. So I'm just going to leave it, and it feels quite performative, and they all feel quite naked. They're all naked and they're all of me, but they don't feel like sexual, or well, I suppose maybe they do, but they just feel like inquisitive rather than exposing, which is quite nice. Like you're saying, there's that fluidity through them and exploration.
Absolutely, yeah. I think like the same with everything kind of being in flux as well. I think it's easy, I mean, especially in my own practice, I think sometimes I can get quite rigid with stuff and almost stuck in moments. So to have these all working together just shows you like, just sort of like the flow of everything, where you're like, it doesn't have to be just like static one thing to the next. It's almost constantly coming and going. The figure like emerging in some paintings, dissolving in some paintings. It just like gives you confidence, or at least gives me confidence anyway, to move on to stuff into the future, which is like more dissolving of forms and even like almost reversing of themes as well, which has just been the super pleasant thing about the whole experience.
And I think we sort of planned out, when we got together to start talking about what we might talk about, I think we were sort of lost a little bit. So we made a playlist where we picked 5 songs, so we might put that on social media tomorrow, but we just decided that, you know, studio practice involves a lot of being alone, and music is a thing we both listen to a lot, so I included a song by Laurie Anderson that is about walking and falling, and it just really resonated with me when I was making these, and I didn't really know what they were, and didn't know if I even particularly liked, I did love them, but anyway. And she was describing how just the very simple act that we all do every day of walking involves falling, and I just love the way that she can leave something that's just very simple description, that carries so much kind of poetic heft, but she's not working at it, because it is true, when you just sort of think about it, you are falling every time you walk. And I suppose I realised that these drawings and my life as a parent do feel like I'm walking and falling, or whatever the equivalent language is in that. And so that was sort of the way we started to talk about what music was, just like a nice trigger, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And we even just we were talking about the paintings and stuff before, and the whole process of it. I think that's the beautiful thing about doing something like this scale that takes up this amount of time, because it's just like kind of mirrors existence as a whole. Where you start off, you're like, I've got like all this nothing ahead of me, I'm not too sure what exactly is going to happen. You work through stuff, you make some mistakes, you kind of like get things back on the right track again, and then you're left with something where you're like, that's actually really nice, like I'm happy with it, it's all kind of like tied up perfectly, yeah. Just to feed with you saying the Laurie Anderson song, there was one called You Are Not an Island, which kind of like, was about the painting around the corner in the ocean, but I think that did a similar thing for me, where I just think that statement was like a nicely powerful one, where it's like you're not alone in this like ocean of things, you're kind of constantly in connection and working with everything in existence, which I thought was like, I mean, I know those paintings are kind of desolate, but like I was saying, the same with that one, it's almost like an exorcism of that sense of isolation, so people can look at it, and hopefully, like you're talking about, like it opens up dialogues around that kind of thing as well. Yeah.
And then, you know, if people do want to ask any questions, like either about anything that we've talked about, but also, I don't know if people did see we've sort of deliberately not talked about some of the things that are in there because you can read it in there. But you might read it and think, well, I might ask a question about that, that's fine. But if there are any questions that people have about anything that we said, or about the work, or observations, if you want to ask them.
I'll open it up. It's a bit of a vague one. What advice would you give to your younger self and to Ali concerning the art of...
Oh, I wouldn't give Ali any advice.
Right.
So. Well, I'm only 21, so no, I wouldn't. What advice? I don't know. Just keep doing it, I suppose, but also keep thinking about it, try it in different places. I'm talking to Ali, but what would I say to myself?
Don't look by the sound of it.
Yeah, I think I would say it'll be amazing at what you used to think doesn't fit in, suddenly fits in, and then it'll change again. Maybe I'd say something. Anybody else?
I wanted to know where you get that sheet from, because I saw people wondering, you held it up, and it's like, where the hell?
Oh, these?
Yeah.
They're £20 each, so this is
Right, okay.
No, they're at the table. They're at the front.
Right, they're up there?
Yeah. Or maybe other people didn't see it, so maybe we should. Yeah. People got it, yeah.
I just wanted to ask you both about materials, because, you know, acrylic and the materials we're using are so different in the way that we might work with them. And it's sort of making me think about that in terms of the body and control. So yours is very risky, Kate, because you're not really in control of the materials until they've done their thing, and then you have to work out what you're going to do. Then you are right, you know, you have to be right in control of it from the moment that you put it onto the canvas. And I just wondered how that sort of affects the work and affects how you think about the final figurative pieces that are on the walls.
I think, like I was saying before, I feel like kind of existence sort of uses into what you do, and I wonder about the rigidity of the pieces, and even the figure in the ones I'm doing now, is because like I was saying, I feel like I'm only just starting off with like absolutely everything. It feels like the self isn't even something that's been fully formed yet, so in art, maybe it's almost an anchoring of like these figures, characters are like fully formed. I know some are kind of like dissolving a little bit, but almost like reaching for something like that. If I could take a stab in the dark, answering your question, yeah.
I find it very freeing that the materials are quite hard to work with. They sort of, again, a bit like the walking and falling thing, the process of collecting them and then making them feel so much sort of part of them. And I suppose that's where I feel like any of the risk is. This feels like the fun bit, which I never used to. I don't always feel like when I'm drawing with traditional art materials, I feel like they come with the weight of the tradition, and these feel like they don't. And it's when I'm making them, sort of the thought of like, will they be rubbish and fade away, and then actually thinking, oh, I suppose that's not rubbish, is it? If I'm going to be Laurie Anderson-esque and just embrace their qualities as they are, that just feels like all of it feels like it unpeels certain things for me, and it creates restrictions, but they're very freeing. Whereas like the overwhelm, I suppose, of, and maybe that's the price maybe of over the years of using quite a lot of different materials to express oneself, like film and video and etc. You're always using your materials to make a statement, and whereas these materials they sort of dominate, so they weirdly take over a little bit and they take pleasure away, like kids do. So they always just feel like they just speak to a happier person that I am now I'm a parent. Somehow they just feel like they carry that. I don't know if that answers your question.
I don't think there's an answer, it was a
Just a,
investigation question.
Did you mention earlier about the film? Kind of in the air, I was imagining that you were using film as part of these, or did you?
I mean, in my work? Yeah. I usually, when I was working at home, when Lucas first came, and then maybe just before that, because I didn't have a studio, my drawings tended to be quite small on like A5 paper and just lots and lots of them. So I would make small animated sort of flip book films, and they tended to be again small domestic scenes animated. So the first film that I made, where I would say it was very specifically in the vein of this work, I made a little hairbrush out of Lucas's hair, and then so I cut his hair and made the hairbrush out of the hair, and then made a film of me making the hairbrush, so it has that a cyclical sort of feel to it. Yes, and then there are a couple of other films, and sometimes I feel like I would like to do that, but it's just, I would like to make another film. I always sort of feel that pull, but I'm quite married to these at the moment, so I might stick with these for a bit. But there's always a sort of animation somewhere in there, like a sense of movement through. I hope there's movement. There is movement in these, but yeah, I've always liked that magic of movement. I mean, in a way, these are animations because they change constantly. So every time that sun square goes across that work at the speed of the day, it takes away some of the pigment from the paper. So you're actually watching a kind of 24-hour animation. I'm not going to put anyone through that, but you know, you can tell in document. I can tell in when I take photographs of the pictures. Whereas the one behind on that wall, and I can't really explain it, although I can a little bit, has got a lot of rust in it, and it's actually darkening. So that animation, if you were going to talk about them in sort of time-based ways, is darkening in that image. So there's lines in that image. The figurative lines are becoming more present. Whereas when I first did it, maybe it didn't look really very figurative at all. Now the figures are starting to come out of it because the inks are changing.
I think, do you mind if I add on to the animation part as well? I think the same with kind of like when I'm layering a scene with sort of the iconography in it, that feels almost like animation too, where like I was saying to you yesterday, I feel like one thing kind of bounces onto the next thing, and then hopefully that gives a sense of movement, like you have the freedom with the materials, sort of with the different elements in it, as if your eyes can sort of scan around it,
Yes.
Hi. So I was just wondering, I think if we could try one question I don't understand properly. How do you feel about being in your throughout practices? So kind of resilient role in the expression, and how that can like compare to some kind of contemporary art aesthetics that could be too clear and not as meaningful. And then particularly for Ali, your landscapes to be how they can be critical about societal issues.
For the landscapes one, kind of more specifically that one, was the figures cut off from sort of the mouth up, like it's got no eyes, and that one was all about kind of like how like an eye for an eye is going to leave the world blind. The figures like are fighting on the bottom and just kind of in this constant leap of violence. I feel like you're talking about societal issues. Part of me now, like I said, I'm like 24, I'm a little bit worried that you kind of just end up inheriting the issues of previously, and that goes on indefinitely, and then it's like, when does that end? So that was kind of about the leap of that. Societal issues, I'm not too sure if it's a societal issue, more of a personal issue, but the one with the art one was kind of about the life of an artist and just existence in general. Like, there's kind of like a little bit of a joke, like there's a can of Coke with the E missing and sort of a uterus like flower. That was meant to be sort of the moment of conception, but then the environments around the outside almost like tell a picture of an existence, where it starts off kind of in the winter, things grow, then when it hits the night time, you sort of move into whatever after. I think, sorry, that's like I was saying, maybe not so much a societal one, but yeah. And then with this one, it was sort of like just about the advent of technology. I think we're living in kind of dark times where the humanity seems to be like getting drained from humanity, and you're left with just like whatever that is, yeah. I hope that answers the question, yeah. So.
Can I ask you again what you said about resilience?
Oh, it was just about being resilient in your art practice, in comparison to how some contemporary art trends might, sacrifice their integrity or the essence of the artist's reflection on their work.
Well, I suppose maybe, all I could say is maybe similar to what I said at the start, was this work felt quite compulsive when I first started making it. I feel like I said, I feel like I could speak about how it speaks into contemporary discourses, but I sort of don't massively want to. I feel like it's there if you want it. It's a bit of it on paper. And, so whether that creates a resilience or whether that's a reaction, I'm not sure. But it feels like I'm really enjoying it and it isn't becoming... So that's quite resilient. Is there any other...
I can ask another one. I was intrigued by the method you used to do these, where you applied the medium and then you decided what it meant. Is that totally right? What I said it, or?
I don't think I decided what they meant. But so say for example this one. So this, I brought this in because it's for sale. I'm not selling it, but so this is a sketch. It's not quite the sketchbook, but it's done in tangerine and some rotten blackberry ink. And to me, it's very figuratively quite graphic. Like you can read it. It's two figures.
You say things, isn't it?
Yeah, and whatever that line is there, you can kind of read, but it connects the two figures.
Yes.
And I made it as a direct response to it when Georgia Maloney, she was on the radio in the studio and she was saying no more gay adoption, no more surrogacy, no more trans, people can have kids. And I was just like, oh, fuck off, do you know? But I was already just doing this work. So a bit like the lovely Laurie Anderson song, but sadly like in a less fun way. It sort of penetrated the work and I was just like, yeah, I just wanted to sort of say, well, we have babies really the same way as you do. And I know that sort of technically isn't true, but I'm an artist, I'm not a scientist or a gynecologist, etc. So anyway, so that sort of series of little sketches of trying to think about that, and then when I just roll out the big piece of paper and get on it, if you like, the materials are just quite hard to work with. So I wet the paper and then I pour the stuff on and it drips everywhere and it goes out of the gap that, and it's like trying to, but I'm sort of enjoying it and allowing it to happen and then let it dry. So it's not really creating meaning, it was just like sort of wanting to bring that up there but then allowing it to do what it was doing. And then there's tiny bits of drawing in this one done with dip pen that's like little hairs, because I always think of like people always talk about pubic hair as like a sign of fecundity and like fertility and stuff. Well, I've got pubic hair. I know I may not be fertile, but I just feel like that's a fact, like a Laurie Anderson fact. So I put it in because it's there, in reality. And it also, I just, it's like drawing, but the drawing goes in after the thing takes place.
Just to say, I was around when Laurie Anderson first made that album,
Right.
by the way, and I had a long time.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I don't know if you want to answer that question. Was it about meaning? Oh, well, I suppose it was specific to me. But do you maybe come to them knowing a sense of like how you want it to look?
I think, that's what's so interesting about the two of them. I'd say maybe that's the difference in sort of methodologies, where like with these ones, I kind of like flesh them out totally before I'm doing them. Then I give myself a little bit of wiggle room. Like sometimes characters will sort of like more personality will bleed into them and stuff, like the kind of the fat cat and stuff in the bottom right of that one, and just different elements. Like I'll allow myself to add on to things, but the blueprint's kind of there from the get-go, which is something I admire in yours as well. I'm like, I wish I could be more loose with stuff, but I think I have the sketch and I'm like, that's what I'm aiming for. If it's not that, then something's a little bit off, with a little bit of wiggle room, like I was saying,
Do you see, I think posture is an extremely important part of Ali's work. How would you explain posture in your practice, and what you convey in posture?
Thank you for the question. I feel like the body's kind of like an instrument for emotion. I think on a daily basis, like when you're speaking to people, you can kind of tell like what the sort of gist is with them, just depending on how they're sitting, like how they're looking, how they're holding themselves. With those, just with working in more kind of like abstract means, I was kind of like trying to push the posture of stuff into like the uncanny valley a little bit. Like that pose isn't possible, you'd be like snapping your back, but like I was trying to capture with that one just a sense of like just giving up, like fatigue, where you just like, oh. And then with the one with the hands and stuff, I was trying to use that almost as like a guiding tool. The same again, like it doesn't work as a body, literally, but it kind of like spreads out the piece. I was thinking with the hands kind of going like that. Also, I was just going for like sort of like tense kind of like excitement. Like when people begin a show or something, they're like, like this is the spread of existence, this is what's going on, With the robot one, the same again. I was in a bit of like a sort of gun fingers phase. That one, I guess the posture is kind of more in like the humanity in between, where it was kind of like holding itself, like the sort of closeness and fragility of humanity in this cold, sort of desolate world just brewing around it. For the fish one, I was trying to get something, sorry to keep on rambling about stuff, but for the fish one, I was trying to get something that looked like it would sink, like the hands are a bit sort of exaggerated and weighted as if it would like anchor it down in the bottom of the ocean. Things that like sort of look like they have the potential for movement, but also just don't, like almost statuesque in a way,
Thank you.
Ali, you mentioned something about illustrative books as generative ways of making it. Stephen's like favourite. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Stephen Mooney from Newcastle University explained it to me when we were talking about the pieces I was making. He was saying illustrative stuff he'd describe as going into a piece with an idea. So like how I was doing the sort of blueprints for those, he'd say you're kind of trying to achieve something with it and impose your view like onto the canvas. Whereas generative stuff, I'd say, is way more like what you do with your pieces, where you allow the materiality to sort of speak to you. Your imagination fills in the gaps, and you're almost in conversation with the piece rather than just like a one-sided sort of talk. That's my understanding of it. I might have got that wrong.
Ali, can I just ask, so are you studying fine art at Newcastle?
It just finished in July 2024,
Continue?
What, sorry?
Are you going to continue?
I'm in like just right around the corner at the moment in the Orbis Community Centre, so it feels like there's just been no breaks whatsoever. It's the best,
If there isn't any more questions, I think we can probably leave it there, and then if you welcome to stay. I don't know if the bar's still open, but we'll just
hang around, yeah.
Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you.